For this project, I will be using Premier's Cotton Fair yarn, and it is half cotton, half acrylic in size 2, and it is in the color Lemon Drops. And this project took almost exactly 4 balls of this yarn, and I will be using a 3.5mm crochet hook and a yarn needle. The first thing we'll be working on is the ribbing for the sleeve, and for that we'll need a foundation chain. I will be showing you how to do a foundation chain in 2 different ways. The first way will be easier, but the second one will be more refined. The timestamps will be in the description if you want to skip forward to the second method. This first method is just using a simple foundation chain. And to start, just do a slip knot by wrapping the yarn around 2 of your fingers with the tail end at the bottom, grabbing your hook, going under and then over, and pulling that piece of yarn through and then pulling the knot tight. And then you want to chain by yarning over and pulling through. And then you want to chain until the ribbing is the length that you want it. And this is the length along your wrist, not around it. Once you finish chaining the length that you want to chain 1 more. And then yarn over, insert your hook into the second chain from the hook, yarn over, pull through, and then yarn over and pull through all 3 on the hook. This will be your first half double crochet, and then you want to continue that until you reach the very last chain. Now what you have done here is equivalent to the half double crochet foundation chain, and now you can skip forward to the timestamp on the screen. Here I'm just going to quickly show you how to do a half double crochet foundation chain. If you want a more in-depth tutorial, then click on the card in the upper right corner. To start the foundation chain, we will do a slip knot. And to do a slip knot, just wrap the yarn around 2 of your fingers and make sure that the tail end is at the bottom. Grab your hook and go under and over and grab that piece of yarn through, pull it through, and then we'll chain 2, and to chain, yarn over and pull through. Now we will do a foundation half double crochet. So to do that, yarn over, insert your hook into the second chain from the hook, and here you want to get under both loops. So you want to go through the V but get under the back loop too, and then yarn over, pull through, then yarn over, pull through 1. This is the chain that you make, and then you want to yarn over and pull through all 3, and this is your half double crochet. To start the next foundation half double crochet, we'll do the same thing but into that chain that we made when we pulled through just 1 loop. And then just continue this foundation chain until it is the length of the ribbing that you want it to be. So this is going to go along your wrist, not around it. I've just done 25 foundation half double crochets. This counts as our first row of half double crochets. You can make this as long or as short as you want it to be, and once you've finished, we can chain 1 and turn. And now we'll be working on the length that goes around the wrist. So to do that, yarn over, insert your hook into the back loop of that V, yarn over again, pull it through, and then yarn over and pull it through all 3 loops on your hook. And we're just going to continue these half double crochets in the back loop only for the rest of the row. And here I am almost finished with my row of half double crochets. So you want to make sure you don't miss that very last stitch because it is a little hard to see. If you do forget the last stitch, then your work will start to slant, and we don't want that. So if you need to, then go back and count how many stitches that you've made. Okay, so I have 25 stitches, so I'm good. And now to start the next row, we will chain 1 and turn, and then half double crochet in the back loops only for this entire row again. Alright, so I've just finished 20 total rows, and it should fit along your wrist like that. But it is stretchy, so you don't have to make it super loose, and it will stretch out as well. The next step is to put the two ends together, and then we're going to slip stitch it closed. And I'm going to be slip stitching in the front loops only for the first side into the back loop of the other side. So to slip stitch, insert your hook into the front loop of that first stitch, and then go over and into that back loop on the other side, and then yarn over and pull through, and then pull through again. And then just do that again, go into that front loop on the first side, into the back loop on the other side, and then complete your slip stitch. And then just go all the way across until the ribbing is closed off. I've just finished slip stitching the cuff closed, and it should look something like this. And now we'll be working on the rest of the sleeve. So this first round is a little difficult just because there aren't stitches already there that you can insert your hook into. But if you line it up with your rows, and I'm doing 3 per row, then it gets a little easier. And here is how to count the rows. So the side of our seam is 1 row, and then the other side, before there's a little ridge, is another row. So each little divot or dip in the ribbing is comprised of 2 rows. And this sleeve is made up of double crochets only, so we'll chain 2 and start double crocheting all around. To do a double crochet, yarn over, insert your hook into that space, yarn over again, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2 loops, and then yarn over and pull through the last 2. So I did 3 stitches per row. So since I did 20 total rows earlier, I'm going to have a total of 60 stitches. If you want your sleeve to be baggier, then add more stitches, and if you want it to be less, then you'd add less stitches. Here I've just finished my 60 stitches all around, 3 per each row, and now I'm going to slip stitch it closed. And when you slip stitch this round, make sure you skip the chain 2 that we did earlier and go into the stitch of the first double crochet that we made. And after you slip stitch, pull it tight so the seam is less visible. And then we'll chain 2 and continue the double crochets. And the very first double crochet should go into that same stitch that we just slip stitched into. When we're finishing our second round, we want to make sure to go into that last stitch, but to not crochet into that slip stitch that we made last round. So this part is the slip stitch, and you want to crochet into here. Then we'll slip stitch, chain 2, and do another round. So the fourth round will be a little bit different, just because we want our seam to go straight instead of slanting off to the right. For this fourth round, I'm going to skip the very first stitch and double crochet into the second stitch. So once we work all the way around, that first stitch that we skipped will become our last stitch. So this will kind of force the seam to straighten out towards the left instead of just continuing to the right. And I will be doing this for every 4th round. So 3 rounds will be regular double crochets all around, and then the 4th round will be skipping 1 double crochet and double crocheting into the second stitch. And here I've come to the end of my 4th round, and my very last stitch will be into that first stitch that we skipped. So you'll have to kind of cross over that chain 2 that we made, and then insert your hook into that stitch and complete your double crochet. So for the sleeves, I did a total of 30 rows of double crochet. The sleeve does not need to be any certain number of rows, and it also does not have to be exactly equal to the length of your arm. This is because the middle panels of the sweater do become larger than the length from shoulder to shoulder, and it will droop down and add some extra length to the sleeve. So here's just a little check-in. I've just finished 8 total rows, and you can see that I've done 3 of just the regular double crochet, and then I skipped the first stitch for the 4th row, and then I did 3 more and then skipped the first stitch for the 8th row. I finished my 30 rows, and now I'm going to chain 1 and cut an extra long strand of yarn. I'm going to need about 100 centimeters or 40 inches of yarn. If your sweater is bigger than mine, then you'll need a longer strand. But don't worry too much about the length, because I will also show you how to attach some yarn to sew in your sides if you run out. And after you finish your sleeve, we're going to need 1 more. So just make 1 more identical sleeve. Now that our sleeves are done, we can start working on the front and back panels. So for this part, I started with the ribbing once again, and this time I did a total of 50 rows of ribbing. So I'm just going to do another half double crochet foundation chain, and then I'm going to add on 49 more rows. You're going to want this ribbing to be about the length from one side of your waist to the other side, but it is stretchy, so you don't have to make it too long. Now that I have my 50 rows, I'm going to chain 1 and start working on the pattern along the side of the ribbing. Instead of the 3 that we did earlier, I'm going to be doing 2 stitches per row. You want this total number of stitches to be even because we're going to be using an alternating pattern of single and double crochets. So you want to always start the row with a single crochet and end the row with a double crochet. To do a single crochet, insert your hook into the space, yarn over, pull through, then yarn over and then pull through the 2 loops on your hook. Next we'll do the double crochet. After, we'll move on to the next row on the ribbing and do a single crochet and a double crochet into that row. Since I'm doing 2 stitches per row and I did 50 rows of ribbing, I'm going to have a total of 100 stitches. But you can add more stitches if you want this sweater to be baggier, or less if you want it to be tighter. Just make sure that it is an even number. So I've just completed an entire row, and now we'll chain 1, turn, and continue doing the same thing, starting with the single crochet. So you want to crochet however many rows you want to reach the bottom of the neckline. And this part you can also adjust. If you want to do more rows, then you'll make the sweater longer. If you want it shorter, then just do less rows. So here I've done 52 total rows. This is just a random number. It's the number of rows that I want the length of my sweater to be. So you can have just any number of rows and you don't even have to count them. For this next part, I'm going to be working on the neckline. So instead of working all the way across, I'm only going to go across 40 stitches. So after I've done 40 stitches, I'm not going to chain one. I'm going to turn the piece and then skip 2 stitches and then single crochet into the third one. This will allow us to work this piece diagonally so that the hole for the neck is a smooth line. Now I'll just continue this row until I reach the end. Once you get to the side, you want to chain 1 and then turn and continue the next row. This is because you want the edge to be straight, but the other side where the neck will be to be at a slant. So every time that you end at the side where the neck will be, you want to not chain 1 and then skip 2 stitches and single crochet into the third. Every time you end at the edge, you want to chain 1, turn and single crochet in that first stitch. And you continue these rows until you reach the length that you want this part to be. And here is another demonstration of when I reach the neck part. I'm going to end with a double crochet and turn without chaining, skip 2 and single crochet into the third stitch. So here I've just finished 15 total rows for the neckline. Now we're going to cut the yarn. And make sure to leave the tail end long enough so you can sew the shoulder parts of both panels together. So I left mine about 10 inches, maybe a little less. Now we're going to replicate this onto the other side. And we'll have to start in the middle instead of the edge because we want to work into the back of the stitches of the last row that we did. And to do that, just count from the left 40 stitches, or however many stitches that you started with. And in your 40th stitch, you want to insert your hook and pull through your yarn. So here is another way you can attach your yarn without doing the double knots. So you would just pull up a loop with the yarn and then chain 1. And then we're going to single crochet into that 40th stitch, that same stitch that we pulled our yarn through. And now we can continue the pattern and make this side identical to the other side. Here is my finished front panel, and I'm going to make sure to leave the yarn end long enough to sew the top together. And once you make your other panel, you do not need to worry about leaving the yarn ends long. Now we are done with most of the crocheting, and we should have 2 identical sleeves and 2 identical front and back panels. Here's a little demonstration on how I like to weave in my ends so that they are really secure. You generally want to choose a front and a back side of each of your panels so you can weave in your ends into the back side, and if they do come out for any reason, then it won't be noticeable, or it'll be on the inside of the sweater so you can't see it. So here I'm just pulling through all of the yarn ends with my crochet hook onto the back side, or what will become the inside of the sweater. First of all, if I have 2 loose ends right next to each other, I'm going to tie them in a double knot. Then I'm going to loop the yarn into my yarn needle and go under a few of the crochet stitches that I made. Then I'm going to pull the yarn through and go back through those same stitches. But make sure to skip over a loop or two so that the yarn doesn't get pulled back through. Then if you have the extra yarn, then you can go back through a third time. Once you're done sewing that end in, you can cut it off. So I've just finished sewing in all of my loose ends, and now I'm going to use the yarn that I left on the shoulder to sew the shoulder parts of the two panels together. This part is similar to how we connected the ribbing on the sleeves together. So I'm going to loop the yarn through my needle, and like with the ribbing, I'm going to go through the outer loop on the front panel into the back loop of the back panel. Then I'm going to pull it taut and then go over and then back into the outer loop on the front panel and then over to the back loop of the second panel. And your seam should start to look something like this. Now I'm just going to finish this side up and then close off the other side, and we can start working on attaching the sleeves. Okay, so I finished sewing up my shoulders, and now I'm going to start on the sleeve and down the side of the sweater. So before I start, I'm going to be using some bobby pins just to pin it together to make sure that everything lines up neatly. So I'm going to go to the very top of the ribbing and then place a bobby pin right through the top of the ribbing on both panels. For the sleeve, you want the seam to be at the very bottom. So I'm going to fold it right where the seam is at. And then line it up on my sweater. I'm also going to use a bobby pin just to pin the top of the shoulder to the top of the sleeve. So we're going to sew on the sleeve and down the side of the sweater with one single strand of yarn. Don't worry too much about this because you can attach yarn along the way. We're going to start at the underarm and work our way up to the shoulder by connecting the top of the sleeve and the top panel, and then we're going to go around the shoulder over to the back and connect the back panel with the back of the sleeve. So if you left an extra long piece of yarn when you finished your sleeve, then you can skip this part. But if you don't have one, then here's how you would attach it. So you want to grab your hook and loop through a piece of yarn that is 100 centimeters or 40 inches long. But if your sweater is bigger than mine, then you'll need a longer piece of yarn. But if it's smaller, then you'll need a shorter piece of yarn. So we're going to attach this piece of yarn by looping it through the top of the sleeve. So just go through one of the stitches on the sleeve and pull it through and then do a double knot. But make sure to leave the loose end long enough for you to sew back in. Then loop the yarn through your needle and work in a clockwise motion going through the sleeve and then into the front panel. I like my seams to be flat, so I'm only going to work in the outer loop on the sleeve. Once I reach the shoulder, I am going to take out the bobby pin and then just continue working around the shoulder, going into the sleeve and into the front panel. Once you reach the underarm part, just continue sewing, but this time, instead of going into the sleeve, you're going to go into the front panel, into the back panel. Now to sew up the ribbing, we'll just sew through the outer loops on either side of the panel. Now we're almost done, and the very last thing to do is to add the neck border. So I'm going to attach my yarn to this corner right here, and then I'm going to do slip stitches all the way around. Here I'm just working on the shoulder part, and now I've already worked up one side of the neckline and over the shoulder. So I'll just continue these slip stitches until I reach my very first slip stitch. Now I'm working on my very last slip stitch, and since there's a small hole, I'm going to go under 2 strands to close it up. When you're finished, don't forget to chain 1, and then we can cut off the end. And then just weave in all of the loose ends, and then we are done. I really hope you like this sweater. Please leave a like if you enjoyed and subscribe if you're new. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.